You know what's almost right in front of us? The Arizona Wildcats.
Oh, nice.
Countdown to the Wildcats.
58 days. 58, huh? 58 is a significant number, I would say, because our next guest was a tremendous number 58 at the BYU. His name's Chris Hoke, friend of the program, former BYU defensive lineman, Super Bowl champ, played with the Steelers in the NFL for a plethora of years. He's on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Chris, welcome back to BYU Sports Nation.
Hey, guys, I appreciate you having me on. It's good to be here.
Hey, 58 days. We got to have number 58 on. Why did you end up choosing that specific number at BYU?
You know what? I have no clue. I remember when I came, and the number that I wish I could tell you the number that they gave me. It's just kind of a random number. Didn't like the number. There was like a checklist out there. You could kind of select what number you want. I picked 58 because I thought it was cool, and the rest is history, I guess. So they say. It
is unique because you're not competing with another guy for 58, I think. So we bring you on the show. We have you on with 58. It's great.
Fantastic.
What are you up to these days, by the way, Chris?
So I live in Pittsburgh still, and involved with the Steelers. And I do the post-game show, on KDK, which is the flagship station, CBS, for the Steelers. And I do some radio during the week. And I also am involved with real estate development, and just got my hands on quite a few things out here in Pittsburgh right now.
Fantastic. We've talked to your old teammate Brett Kiesel, not only in college but in the NFL, about his role in The Dark Knight Rises. How come you didn't get a role in The Dark Knight Rises? We were hoping you'd have one.
I'm still pretty ticked off about that. I'm not sure if I just didn't get the memo or what. I was supposed to be a part of it. I know the executive producer, very, very well, and so we've had a lot of talks about that. I don't know what happened, but I should have been a part of that.
You survived Bane. You survived Bane, I think, was
I'll
the
tell
idea,
you what,
right?
though, man, I would have been scared of Bane. He's a tough sucker.
Does Kiesel take pictures of the royalty checks he gets and send them to him every time they come in? Those 6-cent checks that they roll in.
No, I'll tell you what, Brett does just live down the street from me, though. I see him every once in a while. I'm sure he's got a lot more than just royalty checks coming in from Batman.
that is right. Playing in the NFL for the 4 or 5 years, that'll do it. We're talking with Chris Hoke, former BYU defensive lineman, the number 58 with 58 days to go on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Chris, we've been talking about following the 4th of July, some of the most explosive plays in BYU sports history. What are some of your favorite explosive plays from when you played at BYU or historically?
You know what? I think of when you guys asked me that, I think of a really explosive drive, and it was maybe not just a play, but as I think back in my career, remember my last season was 2000. It was LaVell Edwards' last season, and we didn't have the best year, the year we wanted, but we were down, and Brandon Doman had this explosive drive, threw a couple deep balls, was scrambling around, doing what he did, and really won that game for us there at the end of the game. But we were behind before he came in, and he played a great second half of that game. And to me, that's something that explosively, in terms of coming on the scene, he exploded onto the scene in that Utah game, Brandon Doman.
Chris, last season for BYU football was not what anybody expected. Where do you expect the Cougars to make the biggest improvement heading into 2018?
Well, I think there's no question. The biggest position the most important position they need to improve at is the quarterback position. It was very inconsistent last year. Even when Tanner, before he got hurt, he was very inconsistent in his throwing. He wasn't very effective. And so that, if you want to, if you're going to twist my arm saying what is the most important position, it always begins and ends the quarterback, but particularly because it was very inconsistent last year. I want to see the defense really step up and make big stops. I think overall the defense, it was overshadowed by the lack of production on the offense, but I want to see this defense step up and make important critical stops in games when they need to secure victories.
The defensive line is always an interesting conversation, especially at BYU, where linebacker is a position that BYU has successfully recruited for a long time. Defensive linemen, there were some really good ones, including yourself in your day with you and Brett Kiesel and others. So now Kalani Sasaki and Elias Tuiaki were known for that at Utah. So here in year 3, do you expect an uptick in play from that position?
I sure hope so. Really, at the end of the day, your linebackers will be as good as your defensive linemen, in my opinion. I mean, listen, I came played 11 years for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was always about the defensive lineman being unselfish, about taking on blockers, and the defense was all about the linebackers. And so it seems to me like the kind of guys that the Cougars are recruiting right now are big, old, strong guys, and so they've got to be able to take on those blockers, these two blockers, so these linebackers can roam free. So if they're not getting penetration and they're not being disruptive themselves, they've got to find a way to make sure the linebackers don't get blockers up onto the second level to keep them out of plays. They've got to find a better way to free up those linebackers.
How would you quantify success, perhaps statistically, with the defensive line? Because sacks for the interior linemen are harder to come by. Is it something like tackles for loss? Like, how would you quantify that?
It's honestly, defensive line is unless you're getting sacks or you're getting a bunch of tackles for losses, it's very difficult outside of the meeting room, outside of that football office, to really quantify, okay, is this guy a good defensive lineman? Now, inside the football facility, inside the offices, those players, those coaches, they know that those players are great players because of what they do that's not seen in the statistical breakdown. I mean, these guys are going, and if a defensive lineman is penetrating and making the running back cut his path off early, or he's got to bounce and get wider, but it doesn't show up in the stat book. But it's something that the coaches see, the linebackers see, the defensive unit sees. So it's very difficult to answer your question to really quantify without sacks or tackles for a loss the effectiveness of a defensive lineman.
Talking with Chris Hoke, former BYU defensive tackle, also Super Bowl champion with the Pittsburgh Steelers, joining us on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. A staple of independence for BYU has been tougher schedule, specifically at the beginning of the season against P5 teams. Do you like that approach for BYU moving forward, or would you like to see the schedule lighten up just a little bit?
Well, obviously, if you want to get national recognition, if you want to be considered one of the great teams in college football, you got to beat great teams. You can't play the New Mexico States and the Idahos and teams of the like every single week. You'll be considered a bottom dweller if you beat teams like that. People won't even consider you being a great team. So you've got to play these tough teams. You got to win. And honestly, like everybody else, I wish we'd get into a conference. It gives you more to compete for, more to play for. You've got conference championships. You've got so many other things that in terms of financials, the economics of the game, it makes more sense. It's much, much easier. It's tough being independent because you've got to go out there, and it's a tougher job for Tom Holmoe. He's always got to be on his P's and Q's in terms of trying to get the schedule together and be able to balance a good quality schedule, not having too many hard games up front and then the weak games in the back end. So it's a very tough balancing act for everybody, and I would like them to balance that a little better, even though it's very difficult to do so. And the only way to do that is get into a conference.
Yeah, I'm with you, Chris. Balance is the word, and that's certainly something that's difficult to do, like you mentioned with Tom Holmoe. Because if you play a bunch of good teams, but you go 500 in those and you end up 8-5 or whatever, you're not relevant. You could be.
Well, and then also too, I'll add to that. Not only you're not relevant, you can't beat them, but if you play in very good teams, P5 teams, not just low bottom dweller P5 teams, but you're playing like the Wisconsins, you're playing the Washingtons, you're playing these kind of schools, and then you back to back, you're going to get beat up. You don't have the depth that a lot of these schools have. Where there's a huge drop off from your one player to your two player. And so you get beat up playing that kind of schedule week in and week out, and so that makes it very difficult as well, is to stay healthy throughout the entirety of the season.
Absolutely, and for the second year in a row, BYU is going 3 Power 5s in a row near the beginning of the season, which is certainly tough. Let's finish with this. You were teammates with Kalani Sasaki. What do you think of Kalani and what he's doing and could do for BYU football as the guy in charge now?
Well, I think Kalani's doing a good job. He's being dealt. I think any head coach that come in the situation right now with being independent, with the schedule we have, it's tougher and tougher to recruit. In the past, all the LDS kids, the great LDS kids, wanted to come to BYU. It's not like that anymore. And when you're 4-9 and you're not putting guys in the NFL on a consistent basis, you get one guy here, one guy there, and you get the school up the road that's really putting more players in the NFL than you are. The culture of college football has changed. Kids don't come to be student athletes anymore. They come to get to the NFL. It's a stepping stone. It's just a part of the process to get me to the NFL. That's the mindset right now. And when you're only pushing one guy into the NFL a year through the draft, or maybe sometimes not even one draft pick, and you got the youths up the road, putting in 5 or 6 guys in the draft or 4 to 6. It's tough to compete with the mindset of the high school players right now and not be able to get guys into the NFL. So really, I think Kalani's got his work cut out for him. And if he could start, developing these players, getting more players into the NFL, and be able to, recruit higher quality players, I think that he'll be able to change the fate of BYU football.
Are you pulling for Belgium against Brazil in the World Cup, seeing as how you did go to Belgium on your mission?
I think it doesn't matter how many prayers, it doesn't matter how much I root for those guys, they're going to lose against Brazil.
Well, Chris, great insight. We appreciate the time, and thanks for being number 58 so we could bring you on with number 58.
Guys. Thanks for having me.